Good evening to those returning. Welcome back to the dark, and to those new here, you've just stepped into something real. True horror pulled from real lives and long-forgotten nights. If you dare to keep watching, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video. And in the comments, tell me what kind of true horror story you'd want me to create next. Because once you step into the dark, you'll never see reality the same again. Through the baby monitor, I heard someone whispering my name. The baby was asleep. The parents were gone for the night, and I was the only one in the house. But that wasn't the part that broke me. It's what I saw on the monitor afterward that made me swear I'd never babysit again. I was 16 at the time, living in a quiet suburb just outside of Columbus, Ohio. Babysitting wasn't just a way to make a little money. It was what every teenager in my neighborhood did. This particular family lived only 3 streets over. They had a beige 2-story home with a basketball hoop over the garage, a dogwood tree in the front yard, and one of those small American flags planted in a flower pot on the porch. Inside, everything was neat. A little too neat. The living room smelled faintly like cinnamon candles with family photos covering the walls. Prom pictures, soccer trophies, Christmas mornings. The baby was 8 months old. Chubby cheeks, wispy blonde hair, the kind of baby who hardly cried. She went down early, and by 9:30 I was sitting alone in the kitchen with my math homework spread out across the table. The only sounds in the house were the refrigerator humming behind me and the occasional creak of the old floorboards settling. The TV in the living room was muted, throwing a faint bluish glow across the couch. And beside me on the table sat the baby monitor. It was an older model, plastic casing a little yellowed with age. A tiny green light that flickered every time it picked up noise. Every now and then it gave a crackle of static. Nothing unusual. I remember thinking how ordinary the night felt. So ordinary that when it changed, I noticed it instantly. It started as just a shift in the static. At first, I barely registered it, just white noise like a radio between stations. But then the sound deepened. Underneath the crackle came something steady, rhythmic, breathing, not the quick, shallow breaths of a baby. This was slower, heavier, like the breath of an adult too close to a microphone. I froze, my pencil still hovering over my notebook. I glanced at the monitor, waiting for the green light. It flickered, then as if someone leaned right into the receiver, a whisper slipped through. It said my name. Emily. My stomach dropped. The sound was too clear to be interference. It wasn't the neighbors, it wasn't TV, it was my name spoken in the dark. I sat perfectly still, listening. The baby's room was upstairs, the parents were out. I was the only one in the house. At least, I thought I was. I told myself maybe the monitor had picked up another frequency. Some stranger's walkie-talkie, or even another family's monitor bleeding over. It happens, right? But before I could finish the thought, the whisper returned. This time it didn't just say my name, it described me. Writing at the table. I looked down at my notebook. The pencil was still in my hand. My breath caught in my throat. The voice came again, closer, sharper. I see you. I see. I pushed my chair back slowly, my heart pounding in my ears. I stared at the monitor, praying the sound would stop. But instead, the static cut out altogether. Silence. The green light blinked once, then went dark. I leaned closer, tapping the side of the device. Nothing. Then with a sharp click, it powered back on by itself. What came through wasn't a whisper this time. It was laughter. Not just anyone's laughter. Mine. It was me. My voice, my laugh, played back through the baby monitor. Distorted, drawn out, like someone had recorded it earlier that evening. The sound filled the kitchen, echoing off the linoleum floor. I staggered backward, hand pressed over my mouth, and then, above me, upstairs, A door creaked open. The sound was faint, but it cut through the silence like a knife. The nursery door. I hadn't touched it. Clutching the flashlight from the counter, I forced myself up the stairs, every step groaning under my weight. The hallway stretched out, shadows bending across the carpet. The air was cooler upstairs, as if someone had just walked past. The nursery door stood cracked open. It had been shut when I put the baby down. I pushed it gently, the hinges whining. The baby was still asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling, lips puckered slightly in sleep. Untouched. But the monitor light was glowing, and the voice came again. This time, a single word. Closer. I could feel my legs shaking. Every instinct told me to grab the baby and run, so I did. I scooped her into my arms, blanket and all, and hurried toward the door. I didn't even bother with shoes, I just needed out. But then I glanced at the monitor one last time. And I wish I hadn't. The small screen flickered, static clearing for just a moment. On it I saw myself, standing in the nursery in the exact position I was standing in now. But my arms were empty. The version of me on the monitor wasn't holding the baby, it was just staring straight at the camera, face pale, eyes dark. The real baby squirmed in my arms. On the monitor, the other me tilted its head. And then, in my own voice, the whisper returned. You can't leave. That was the night I quit babysitting for good. I never told the family what really happened, and I never again stepped into a house with a baby monitor in it. To this day, I don't know if it was interference, a trick, or something else. But I know what I heard, and I know what I saw. But that wasn't the only babysitting job that went wrong. Another sitter just a few states away walked into a home that looked perfectly safe, until she realized the family hadn't told her the truth about who really lived there. I froze mid-step. A little boy was staring at me through the living room window. The problem was, the boy I was babysitting was asleep upstairs. And what I saw next made me question if the child outside was ever real, or if I had already let something inside. I was 15 at the time, babysitting for a family in a quiet neighborhood just outside of Des Moines, Iowa. Their house was the kind you'd see in any Midwest suburb. 2-story white siding, porch light that flickered every so often. The street itself was nearly empty at night, just a single street lamp throwing weak yellow light across the pavement. The parents left around 7. They ordered pizza for me and told me Ethan, their 6-year-old, would be easy. Shy, quiet, and usually out by 8. They weren't wrong. I read him a picture book, tucked him under his dinosaur sheets, and by the time I turned off the light, he was already half asleep. By 9, the house was calm. The only sounds were the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the faint buzz of the muted TV in the living room. I sat on the couch, phone in my lap, a slice of cold pizza on a paper plate. I remember scrolling through Instagram, checking reminders about a history test coming up on Monday. Nothing out of the ordinary. That's when I saw it. Or him. Movement outside the corner of my eye. A shadow framed in the glass. I turned my head, and there was a little boy staring at me through the living room window. At first I thought maybe it was just a neighbor's kid messing around. But something about him froze me in place. Because kids blink. And he didn't. He stood there completely still, pressed close to the glass. The streetlight behind him cast part of his face in shadow. But what I could see was pale, too pale. His hair was dark, his eyes unblinking. His expression never changed, blank, flat, empty. I sat there staring, waiting for him to laugh or knock or do something normal. But he didn't move. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was Ethan's friend from school. Maybe a kid from the neighborhood pulling a prank. But something in the back of my mind screamed that it wasn't. because every time I looked back at that window, he was in the same exact position, same eyes, same stare, like a photograph. I finally forced myself to stand up. I thought maybe if I walked over, tapped the glass, told him to leave, he'd run off. But before I could take more than a step, I heard it. A faint, deliberate sound. Tap, 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 knuckles, pressing against the glass in slow rhythm. My chest tightened. I wanted to close the blinds to shut it out, but something stopped me. I kept staring, frozen halfway between fight and flight. And then, the phone rang. The sound startled me so badly I nearly dropped my phone. It wasn't my cell. It was the landline on the kitchen wall. The old cordless phone buzzed, its screen glowing with a blank caller ID. No number, no name. Against every instinct, I answered it. Hello? At first, silence, not even static. Then a voice, small, thin, childlike. Don't let him in. I went cold all over. The voice was a whisper, almost like it was spoken from right behind me. My throat was dry. I managed to whisper back, "Who is this?" The line crackled, and again the voice repeated, "Don't let him in." The phone slipped out of my hand and clattered to the tile. The sound echoed through the kitchen. I spun toward the window, but the boy was gone. The glass was empty, only the faint reflection of the muted TV behind me. I swallowed hard, pulse still racing. I told myself it was fine, whoever it was. They left, but then I saw him again, not outside, inside, standing at the far end of the hallway, bare feet on the carpet, his small frame silhouetted by the glow of the nightlight. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stared, expressionless, silent, like he had always been there. I panicked. I bolted past him, nearly tripping over the rug, and tore up the stairs 2 at a time. All I could think was, Ethan. Get to Ethan. Protect him. I ran straight to his bedroom and threw open the door, but the bed was empty. The sheets were cold, neatly pulled up, not warm, not rumpled, like no one had ever slept there. My chest tightened. I couldn't catch my breath. I checked the closet, the floor, even under the bed. Nothing. That's when headlights swept across the wall, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. The parents were home. I flew down the stairs as the front door opened, their laughter fading when they saw my face. I must have looked terrified because the father asked immediately, "What happened?" "Where's Ethan?" I stammered. He wasn't in his bed. There was a boy outside, at the window, and then, inside." They both froze. Their smiles vanished. The mother's face went pale. I tried to explain what I saw. Dark hair, blank stare, silent, never blinking. And when I finished, they just looked at each other, silent, like they already knew. Finally, the mother whispered, barely audible, "We don't talk about him." That was all she said, no explanation, no reassurance. Just those words. That was the night I learned, not every child you see is alive. And sometimes the ones who stare in through the glass are already inside. But not every babysitting horror involves a figure at the window. Sometimes the terror comes from the walls of the house itself, like the sitter in Illinois who swore she heard footsteps in the attic, even though the family told her they didn't have one. "Don't open our bedroom door under any circumstance." That's what the parents told me before they left. They said it like it was the most important rule of the night. It sounded strange, controlling. But I didn't argue. I should have listened. Because by the time they came home, that door wasn't even there anymore. Greater than and what replaced it still keeps me up at night. This was in the fall of 2019. I was in college picking up babysitting jobs around Columbus, Ohio. This house was in Upper Arlington, big lawns, quiet streets, the kind of suburb where every driveway had a minivan or SUV. The family was normal enough at first glance. Two parents in their late 30s, polite, professional. A little boy, 3 years old, with a head full of curly hair and a permanent smile. The mom walked me through the routine. Snacks on the counter, toys in the living room, bedtime at 9. Pretty standard. But then her tone changed. She looked at me dead serious, lowering her voice like it was a secret. Greater than whatever happens, don't open our bedroom door. I thought maybe they had valuables inside or they just didn't trust babysitters poking around. I shrugged and nodded. Sure, no problem. The dad repeated it firmer this time. Greater than under any circumstance. It stuck with me. But after they left, I brushed it off. I figured it was just one of those weird house rules. The night started quietly. The boy was happy watching cartoons. He sat cross-legged on the rug, pushing toy cars across the hardwood floor. I sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone, texting friends about weekend plans. The glow of the TV filled the room, and for a while everything was normal. Then I heard it. A faint scratching sound. From upstairs. At first I thought it was the dog, but they didn't have one. It was coming from the parents' room, the one they told me not to open. I muted the TV. The room went quiet except for that faint, steady scratch. The boy looked up at me wide-eyed. Then he turned back to his toy cars and said something that chilled me. That's where Mommy keeps the other one. I forced a laugh, trying to play it off. The other what? But he didn't answer. He just pushed his car across the rug again, humming to himself like he hadn't said a word. Greater than kids say creepy stuff all the time. I tried to forget it, but the scratching didn't stop. I went upstairs slowly, every step creaking under my weight. The hallway was dim, a single bulb casting yellow light across the floor. And there it was, the parents' bedroom door, closed, locked, just like they'd left it. I stood there listening. Scratch, 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 then silence. Then 3 heavy knocks, slow, deliberate. My stomach turned. I whispered out loud, "Hello? Is someone in there?" No answer. The boy's voice carried from downstairs, greater than "It wants to come out." I froze. The knocks stopped. Then came a new sound, dragging. Something heavy scraping across the floor inside that room. That was it for me. I rushed back downstairs, scooped the toddler up, and sat on the couch with the TV back on loud, pretending everything was fine. But then, around 9:30, the lights flickered and died. Everything in the house went black. The TV, the lamps, even the hum of the fridge, except for one light. The hallway bulb upstairs, the one above the parents' room, was still glowing, and I could see the doorknob turning on its own. Click, click, click. Greater than I didn't know if the mistake was opening the door or leaving it shut. I grabbed the boy and ran to the kitchen. My hands were shaking as I tried the cordless phone, but it was dead. No dial tone. I pulled out my cell phone. It had 1 bar. I dialed 911. My voice cracked as I explained that someone was inside the house, that I was alone with a child. The dispatcher told me to wait outside. I barely managed the locks before I shoved the door open and stumbled onto the porch. The boy clung to my shirt, his face buried in my shoulder. Neighbors noticed. A woman across the street came out asking if everything was all right. All I could do was shake my head, whispering, "There's something upstairs." When the police arrived, 2 officers went inside with flashlights. I waited on the curb with the boy, heart pounding. Minutes later, the officers came back out, faces pale, confused. One of them asked me to walk back in with them. I hesitated but followed. We climbed the stairs, flashlights sweeping the walls. When we reached the spot where the bedroom had been, I froze. It wasn't there, no door, just smooth drywall, like it had never existed. Greater than I swore up and down there had been a door, I described the brass knob, the white frame, the exact spot it stood. The officer shook his head. "There's no door here, miss. Just wall." But I knew what I'd seen. I could still hear the knob clicking in my head. The parents pulled into the driveway shortly after. I expected shock, concern, panic. Instead, they were calm, too calm. When I told them what had happened, the dad cut me off. His voice was cold, controlled, greater than, "We don't have a bedroom upstairs." The mom smiled tightly like she was rehearsing it. "You must have been confused." Long night, I'm sure I didn't argue, I just wanted to leave. But as I handed their son over, he looked at me with wide, innocent eyes and whispered, "You weren't supposed to see it. People ask me if I imagined it, if I mistook a shadow or a dream or stress. But I remember the sound of that knob turning. I remember the dragging across the floor. And I know what I saw." By the time the parents came home, the door was gone. The wall was smooth like it had never been there. But I'll never forget where it stood, or what waited behind it. Greater than I checked the clock. It was 10:42. The next time I looked, it was 1:08 a.m., and the phone in my hand was still ringing. I remember the tone of it, the high-pitched ring of an old landline drilling into my ear. But that wasn't the part that froze me. That wasn't the only thing wrong. The call was coming from me. This happened in 2017 when I was babysitting for a family in Naperville, Illinois. They lived in a quiet neighborhood just off Ogden Avenue. Rows of brick houses, trimmed hedges, quiet after dark. The kids were easy. A brother and sister, 5 and 7, already tucked into bed when I arrived. Their parents left me pizza money, gave me the Wi-Fi password, and said they'd be back around midnight. The house was ordinary, warm, lived in. Family photos on the mantle, half-finished puzzles on the table, a fridge covered in crayon drawings. I spent the first hour scrolling on my phone, half watching reruns on TV, checking assignments due the following week. On the side table was a landline phone, an old corded model, beige plastic with a faint buzz in the line. The kind of phone every house used to have, just sitting there. Greater than it was background noise, harmless. I didn't even notice the first call right away. I thought it was a wrong number. Around 10:30, the phone rang. The sound startled me, the sharp, old-fashioned trill echoing through the living room. I picked up. There was a pause, then a man's voice. Flat, emotionless. Greater than "Check the basement." I froze, waiting for a laugh, a punchline. None came. I hung up, assuming it was a prank. But the phone rang again, and again. Every time I answered, it was the same voice. Greater than "Check the basement." No introduction, no explanation. Just those 3 words. I stopped answering after the 4th call, but the ringing wouldn't stop. Back to back, relentless, like the caller knew I was still there, listening. At some point, I don't know when, the voice changed. This time it said, "Greater than don't check the basement, he's already out." My stomach dropped. I knew it was just a prank. It had to be. But the way he said it, calm, measured, made me feel like I was already too late. I should have unplugged the phone right then. I should have ignored it, but instead, I went to look. I grabbed the cordless flashlight the family kept by the fridge and walked to the basement door. It was cracked open. I swear I had closed it earlier when I checked the locks. The air was colder by the basement steps, heavy, like it was pressing up from below. I flicked on the light, shining it into the dark. Nothing. Just wooden stairs descending into shadows. But it didn't feel empty. The phone was still pressed against my ear. Even though I hadn't dialed anyone, the line hissed with static, swelling until it almost drowned out everything else. And beneath the static, other voices. Dozens of them overlapping, whispering, almost chanting. I couldn't make out words, just layers of sound. I slammed the receiver down, my hands shaking. Silence. For maybe 3 seconds. Then the phone rang again, louder, sharper, like it was screaming into the empty house. I remember whispering to myself, "Please stop, please stop, please stop." Every time I answered, I lost track of time, like the call itself was erasing the minutes. I don't remember how many times I picked up, or how many times that flat voice told me what not to do. I just remember looking at the clock, 10:42, and the next time it was 1:08 a.m., as if the hours between had been swallowed. I was still standing in the same place, the phone pressed to my ear, and the voice on the other end was no longer a stranger's. It was mine, my own voice, sobbing, pleading. "Please hang up. Please don't let me in." The sound of my own desperation looped through the receiver, shaking me so bad I almost dropped it. I shouted into the line, "Who is this?" But all I heard back was myself echoing greater than "Please, please don't let me in." I slammed the phone down and ran to the kids' room. They were still asleep, peaceful, untouched. I stayed there, crouched in the corner until the headlights of their parents' car swept across the wall. When they got home, I was pale, shaking, holding their cordless phone in my lap. Later, I checked the call logs. There was only one entry. A single call, repeated over and over, starting just after 10:30. The caller ID said the number was the landline itself. The house phone had been calling me, and I still don't know if I made that call, or if someone else answered for me. The house was silent except for one sound, the toddler's lullaby toy. It kept playing even though I had already taken the batteries out earlier that night. And standing in that room with the glow of the nightlight and the shadows stretching across the walls, I realized some toys don't need batteries, and some children don't sleep alone. I thought that was the strangest part of the night. I was wrong. This was back in 2011. I was 16, babysitting for the Crawfords in Overland Park, Kansas, a safe suburban neighborhood where nothing bad was supposed to happen. The Crawfords had one child, a 3-year-old named Daniel. The house was exactly what you'd picture. 2-story beige siding, a basketball hoop over the driveway, and a fenced backyard where Daniel's toys were scattered across the grass. Inside, it smelled faintly like laundry detergent and vanilla candles. That night was supposed to be easy. Daniel's parents were heading to a dinner with friends, and my only job was to keep him in bed until they came home. By 8:30, he was tucked under his rocket ship blanket, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. Glow-in-the-dark stars dotted the ceiling. A soft amber nightlight glowed from the wall. I sat in the hallway at a small desk with my English homework spread out, baby monitor beside me. The air conditioner hummed. Crickets chirped outside. The kind of night you forget you're even babysitting, but then I heard him talking. At first, I thought he was just babbling. Kids do that. But when I leaned closer to the baby monitor, I realized these weren't random words. He was whispering, clear enough that it sounded like he was answering someone. I walked to his door and cracked it open. Daniel was sitting upright in bed, clutching his stuffed dinosaur, his head turned toward the corner of the room. I asked, trying to sound playful, "Hey buddy, who are you talking to?" He turned to me, expression calm, and said, "She says you shouldn't look at her." I froze. The words hit heavier than they should have. I laughed nervously and said, "Who's she?" Daniel just lifted a finger and pointed toward the empty rocking chair in the corner. And just as my eyes landed on it, the chair gave a slow, steady creak, rocking back, then forward like someone had shifted their weight into it. That was the moment I realized Daniel wasn't pretending. And that's when the room itself started to change. I felt every hair on my arms rise. I told Daniel gently to lie back down, but before I could reach him, he giggled, and then he screamed, high-pitched, terrified. He pointed past me and shouted, "She's behind you!" I spun around so hard I almost tripped. And suddenly the room was freezing. I could see my breath. In May, in Kansas. Before I could process it, a sound filled the air, sharp, metallic notes. Daniel's lullaby toy sitting on the dresser. It was playing again. But I had taken the batteries out earlier when it wouldn't stop. I remembered placing them right there on the dresser next to his nightlight. Still, the toy played on, each note drawn out, warped, like the sound was being pulled through water. I grabbed Daniel and held him close, whispering it was okay, even though my chest felt tight with fear. And then something worse. The toy's sound didn't stop when I picked it up. It grew louder. The music wasn't coming from the toy anymore. It was filling the room, every corner, every shadow. Like the walls themselves were singing Retention Trigger. And the whole time Daniel kept whispering, "Don't make her mad." When the Crawfords finally came home, Daniel was asleep again, curled under his blanket like nothing had happened. I didn't tell them right away. How could I? How do you explain that a toy without batteries played on its own? Or that their son claimed someone was in his room? They walked me out, thanked me, told me I'd probably had an easy night. I forced a smile, grabbed my backpack, and left. But when I got home, I dropped my backpack on the floor and I froze. From inside it, muffled but clear, I heard that same lullaby playing. My hands shook as I unzipped the bag. There it was, the star-shaped toy, sitting in the bottom of my backpack. I hadn't touched it, I hadn't taken it, but somehow it was there. I pulled it out, dropped it on the carpet, the music stopped instantly, and my bedroom was silent again. To this day, I don't know how it got into my bag, I don't know how it followed me home. And the strangest part came years later. I ran into Mrs. Crawford at the grocery store. She smiled, said Daniel was in middle school now. Before leaving, I asked her if he ever remembered much from when he was little. She hesitated. Then she said something I'll never forget. He doesn't remember that night. But he still talks to someone in that room. Says she sits in the rocking chair. Says she waits for him to fall asleep. That was the last time I ever babysat for the Crawfords. Because babysitting is supposed to be simple. Watch the kids, lock the doors, wait for the parents. But some nights remind you that you're not the one in control of the house. And when I think back to that toy playing without batteries sitting inside my backpack, I can't shake the thought. If it wasn't me who brought it home, then who did? And if you think that's disturbing, wait until you hear what happened to the next babysitter.